The Druid in Mr. Pandaria goes through tons of changes. That's Resto, Boomy, and specifically Feral, because Feral actually has two specs now. It's got Guardian and it's got Feral DPS, so you've got a bear spec and a cat spec. Each class on this channel is going to have a mini-series where it's split into playlists. This will be the Druid. In this video, we're looking at the talents, and what you'll find in this playlist when it's complete will be 3 separate videos on Resto, Balance, and Feral, so you can just watch what you're interested in, and then finally a guide for each of them as well. Just a short couple of minutes, this is how you play it in MoP. So with the talent system overhaul, you'll notice now you get a choice every 15 levels of 3 talents. For level 15, it's movement based, so you're either going to have Feline Swiftness, which just increases your movement speed all the time by 15%, Displacer Beast, which teleports the Druid up to 20 yards forward, activating cat form and increasing movement speed by 50% for 4 seconds, which is particularly cool because it's a bit of a blink/dash. Flash? No. Wild Charge, which is probably my personal favourite, which is actually useful in every single form now. So if you're not shapeshifted, you fly to an ally's position. If you're in bear form, it's a charge and an immobilise for 4 seconds. If you're in cat form, you'll leap behind an enemy, dazing them for 3 seconds. If you're Moonkin, it's a bit like a disengage for hunters. Travel form causes you to leap forward by 20 yards, and aquatic form increases the swim speed by an additional 150% for 5 seconds. Now this is such a unique ability. Up until now, we've been used to having Feral Charge, where it will work in both bear and cat, but now having these other useful charges, depending on which form you're in, is extremely useful. At level 30, you're going to get your healing talent. So the first one being every 5 seconds, it just heals you for 5% of your maximum health. But if you're at full health, the most injured nearby ally will be healed instead. Now this is just a great passive that you don't need to worry about, and you're actually going to help out people around you if you're not in need of healing yourself. Renewal is a 2-minute cooldown that instantly heals the Druid for 30% max health, and this is usable in all forms. And finally, Cenarion Ward, which is on a 30-second cooldown, and it protects a friendly target, causing any damage taken to heal the target for 30k every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. Gaining the healing effect consumes the Cenarion Ward, and this is usable in all forms. Now, Cenarion Ward is not one I use, but it can be really good as a tank, because as a bear, just using this every 30 seconds, and then you're getting 6 seconds worth of healing when you get hit, is actually pretty strong. I'll be honest with you, Gift is the one that I use the most, just because I'm lazy. At level 45, you've got your CC talent. So Fairy Swarm, first of all, grants an improved version of Fairy Fire that also reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. Being able to use this as a ranged slow in PvP as a Feral is actually super strong. I mean, not necessarily Feral, every spec of Druid, but, you know, as Feral where you're trying to close a gap, and let's say Wild Charge is on cooldown, Fairy Fire to get close to him, pretty sick. Mass Entanglement is exactly how it sounds, so it roots your target in place for 30 seconds and spreads to additional nearby enemies, and then damage caused may interrupt the effect. And this is usable in all forms as well. And then of course Typhoon, we all know what Typhoon is, it's just a nice knockback. It just summons a violent Typhoon that strikes the target in front of the caster within 30 yards, knocking them back and dazing them for 6 seconds. Now this is also usable in all forms. Now moving on to the more interesting talents, at level 60 is where you're going to get your first real DPS talents. You've got Soul of the Forest. So as a balanced Druid, your Wrath, Starfire and Star Surge casts have an 8% chance to cause your next Astral Communion to instantly grant 100 lunar or solar power. Whilst you'll find out exactly what Astral Communion is when we get to the balance changes, I might as well tell you what it is now. Astral Communion is a channeled ability which grants you 25 lunar or solar energy every second for 4 seconds, and it will generate the power type most beneficial to you. So if I use it at the moment completely balanced with 0 of 0, it's going to take me over into Lunar. Now this is a great way to get from one to the other, of course, especially if there's downtime during a fight. If you've got downtime because a boss is transitioning and you're not in an Eclipse state, you can just Astral Communion quickly to get into that state. That's why this talent is actually really strong, because you've got an 8% chance to make you be able to just do an instant cast Astral Communion to instantly get you 100 lunar or solar power, whichever way you need to go. For Feral DPS, your finishing moves grant 4 energy per combo point, so if you're doing a 5-point combo point finisher, you're going to get 20 energy back, and that's particularly, this is one that I use a lot for Feral, and again, when we get into the Feral videos, you'll see why. For Guardian, Mangle Bear now generates 30% more rage and deals 15% more damage, so just a very nice passive bonus to one of your hardest hitting abilities. And finally for Resto, you gain 100% haste for your next spell when you cast Swift Mend. So after a Swift Mend, being able to get Soul of the Forest to then do a really heavily hasted Wild Growth is absolutely insane. Soul of the Forest overall is just a great talent for pretty much every spec, to be honest with you. But then Incarnation. So Incarnation is a big 3-minute cooldown that grants a superior shapeshifting form appropriate to your specialization for 30 seconds. You can freely shapeshift in and out of this form for the duration of Incarnation. So for balance, it gives you an improved Moonkin form that gains 25% increased arcane and nature damage. Now this is only while Eclipse is active, but getting 25% extra damage is obviously massive. King of the Jungle gives you an improved cat form that allows the use of all abilities which normally require stealth, and allows the use of Prowl while in combat, and removes the positional requirement of Ravage. So this basically brings Ravage online for 30 seconds as part of your DPS rotation, which is obviously really good. I'd say particularly for burst fights. Really, I think for long, sustained fights, I still prefer Soul of the Forest for Feral, to be honest. For Guardian, it's going to give you an improved bear form that reduces the cooldown on melee damage abilities and Growl to 1.5 seconds, so basically for 30 seconds, rage allowing, you can just spam and never need to worry about losing aggro. And for Restoration, it gives you your big Tree of Life, and it increases healing done by 15%, increases your armor by 120%, and enhances Life Bloom, Wild Growth, Regrowth, and Entangling Roots. For Resto Druids, this will be nothing new to you. Obviously, you'll be able to put Life Bloom on unlimited targets. It makes Regrowth instant cast. It's all the things that you're already used to with Tree of Life. That basically is Tree of Life now, because you don't get Tree outside of that in Mr. Pandaria. And then finally, Force of Nature, which again, these treants act differently depending on what spec you're in. So on a 20-second recharge, and each one lasts 15 seconds, for balance, it just stands there casting Wrath and will cast Entangling Roots. For Feral, it just melees for physical damage and will cast Entangling Roots. For Guardian, it just melees for a lower amount of physical damage and it will use Taunt. So this kind of makes Force of Nature, or your treants, whatever you want to call them, a little bit like Army for Feral tanks. And then finally for Resto, it just heals a nearby injured ally for 8.9k and will use Swift Mend. Honestly, they might sound good, but unless anything else is found out about them that I don't already know, they're fairly lackluster in comparison to the other two talents. At level 75, we'll fly through these because it really is just CC abilities again, so you're going to have Disorientating Roar, which invokes the spirit of Ursel to roar, disorientating all enemies within 10 yards for 3 seconds. Now this is actually really strong in certain places, like if you're doing gold challenge modes, for example, and there's a big pack of casters all casting at the same time, you can disorientate in Roar, essentially using it as a mass interrupt. Ursul's Vortex you'll already be very familiar with, where it basically slows anyone that goes near it and pulls them back in when they try and move away. And then Mighty Bash, which is basically an improved bash because it can be used in all shapeshift forms, and it lasts 5 seconds on a 50-second cooldown. Overall, depending on the fight and what's going on, will depend on what talent you use there, because all of them have got a good use case in certain situations. And finally, the big boy level 90 talents. First of all, you got Heart of the Wild. Now, this is quite a long one. That's what she said. But it increases stamina, agility, and intellect by 6% at all times, so it's just a really nice static buff no matter what, even if you don't use any other part of this talent. But basically, when you use this on a 6-minute cooldown, it's going to give you 45 seconds of where you can fill another role. So to give you a real example of what you're probably experiencing right now, there's only really one crossover that's any problem at all. That's red, yellow, green, black. Now, you really want to use 2 healers on that fight, and most people will. If you've got 2 slightly weaker healers, and all you want to do is be able to get through that one particular, 45-second portion of the fight, and you don't need a 3rd healer anywhere else, this is the sort of place where this can come in really handy, where if there's just one portion of a fight where actually you could do with a 2nd tank, just for this one small period of time, or you could do with extra damage, or you could do with an extra healer. So this actually, on a fight-by-fight basis, can be extremely strong. Because let's say you're not a Guardian Druid. We'll say you're a Resto Druid. While you use this and you're in bear form, your agility, expertise, hit, and armor bonuses are increased. So Vengeance is granted as well, and the chance to be hit by melee critical strikes is reduced. Basically, for 45 seconds, no matter what spec you are, this turns you into a tank. So again, if you're doing a boss in MoP and there's just this one small period where you're having to use a 2nd tank, but you've got any spec of Druid in the group that isn't obviously a Guardian, or it would be pointless, you can just get them to use this and take over tanking for 45 seconds. Again, even if you never use the secondary bits that we're talking about now, just the flat 6% agility, intellect, and stamina is still huge anyway. If you're not a feral druid, it makes you do more damage in cat form because it gives you more agility, hit, expertise. If you're not resto, it's going to reduce the mana cost of all your spells by 100%, and it lets guardian druids be able to cast rejuve while shapeshifted. So as a tank druid, this is absolutely insane to be able to use this and be throwing rejuves out while you're still tanking. Honestly, even though it's not a talent that I use a great deal, you can already see how many good use cases there would be for it. And then finally, if you're not a balanced druid, you're going to get hit capped and all your damage spells cost 100% less mana. So if you was a resto druid, for example, and it's the end of the fight and it's like on 2%, 3%, and you're starting to wipe, just pop this and send damage. Now, Dream of Cenarius is my favourite talent. So the Emerald Dream grants a benefit which varies by your combat specialisation. So firstly, as balance, increases healing from Healing Touch by 20%, and casting Healing Touch increases the damage bonus of your next Eclipse by 25%. Now, for all of these specs, I'll be completely honest with you, this talent isn't for everyone. Yes, Dream of Cenarius, even as a balanced druid and making sure that you weave in healing touches, will probably provide more DPS executed right than any of the other talents, but it's got a much, much bigger margin for error, and that's across all druid specs. So I do see, in terms of passing and maximum damage, this is going to be the talent that a balanced druid would use. But for someone a bit more casual, don't want too much complexity, just wants to even be like me and be lazy in raids, something like Heart of the Wild would probably be better. However, for feral, I would say this talent is non-negotiable. It increases healing from Healing Touch by 20%, and casting Healing Touch causes your next two melee abilities to deal 30% additional damage. Now, the way you use this as feral is you're going to be using Predatory Swiftness, which causes your Healing Touch to be instant cast, and you're going to be using it to get really, really strong bleeds on. So before you cast a Rip, you're going to want to make sure that you got a Predatory Swiftness to be able to heal yourself. So your Rip and then probably a Rake directly after, or possibly even a Thrash, is going to do 30% more damage for its entire duration. For feral DPS, learning how to use this talent, well, firstly, it's a lot of fun. It makes the feral rotation absolutely amazing. And secondly, I truly believe that if you want to do reasonably well as a feral druid, this talent isn't negotiable. For Guardian, again, surprise, surprise, it increases the healing done by Healing Touch by 20%, but it also increases the critical strike chance of your Mangle in bear form by 10%, and your Mangle bear critical strikes have a 40% chance to make your next Healing Touch or Rebirth instant, free, and castable in all forms. It also causes it to benefit from attack power instead of spell power. Outside of Heart of the Wild, this is what I would use as a feral tank. To be fair, this is the talent I would use as feral, full stop, whether it's tank or DPS. Because being able to so frequently have those instant heals that are going to do a lot, on top of the fact that they're going to do more because they're scaling with attack power now and you're going to have Vengeance, I think there's a good argument to use this over Heart of the Wild. Even though 6% stamina and agility as a bear is absolutely huge, I think if you need or you like to be very self-sufficient, Dream of Cenarius is probably the way to go. But that is if you want a lot of self-sustainability. If you don't need it for maximum damage, maximum threat, maximum output, of course, Heart of the Wild is the way to go. And finally, the Atonement Druid. So it increases Wrath damage by 20%, and your Wrath spells cause a nearby ally to be healed for 100% of the damage done. Now, there's not really a lot to say there. It is actually something that I like to use in dungeons as a resto druid, but I wouldn't use it in raids. And then finally, Nature's Vigil. I personally see this as quite a good talent, but it's not exceptional. I think for every spec of druid, you could use Nature's Vigil, but it's kind of the easy, I'll just press this every 1.5 minutes option, rather than actually getting the most out of your level 90 talent. Because what it does increases all damage and healing done by 12% for 30 seconds, and while active, all single target healing spells also damage a nearby enemy, and this will be for 25% of the healing done, and all single target healing and damage spells and abilities also heal a nearby friendly target for 25% of the amount done. So like you can see, it's a little damage boost, 12%, which is not bad, don't get me wrong, for 30 seconds, and it's going to help out doing a bit of healing, or if you're a healer, it's going to help out doing a bit of damage. But overall, as a DPS, you're going to get more than that 12% damage buff for the 30 seconds out of either of the other talents, in my opinion. And I do say in my opinion because remember, as we get sims updated for MoP and stuff like that, my opinion won't be opinion anymore, it will be fact. I'll be telling you factually, accurately, which one of these talents is best. But at the moment, can kind of just go off of private server experience, and for any of you that know me, I've been playing a lot of MoP over the last couple of years, so yeah. But that's the Druid talents anyway, and I wanted to do the talents separately to all of the other videos, so it doesn't matter whether you're Boomy, Resto, Feral, whatever you are, it's going to be relevant to you. And then the next video is going to be broken down by spec, so if you don't care about Boomy, don't watch the Boomy video. If you don't care about Feral, don't watch the Feral video. but I will, over the next couple of months, put all of these into their individual class playlist as well. So if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.